The whisper in the darkness. The night on the alien colony was cold and silent, the air thick with dust and the faint smell of rust. Evan, a human mechanic who lived on the edge of the settlement, was walking home from the scrapyard, his flashlight flickering weakly. The twin moons above gave little light. Only pale shadows stretched across the ruined land. He had repaired machines all day, fixing broken engines and scavenging for parts no one wanted. He just wanted rest, maybe a warm cup of tea. But as he passed the old abandoned field behind the junkyard, something strange caught his ear. It was soft at first, almost like the wind whispering through pipes. Then it came again, clearer this time, a weak voice, trembling and full of pain. "Help, please." Evan froze, his heart skipped a beat. The voice sounded close, but there was no one around. He turned his flashlight toward the sound and saw an old stone well, half covered by metal debris and dead vines. The place looked forgotten for years. He stepped closer, listening. "Is someone there?" He called out carefully. A faint voice answered, barely above a whisper. "Please, don't leave me." His chest tightened. He leaned over the edge of the well and shone his light downward. For a moment he saw only darkness and the shimmer of dirty water. Then he saw her, a small figure clinging to the rough wall. Covered in mud and blood, her skin was pale blue, her hair tangled with dirt, and her eyes. They glowed faintly silver in the darkness. Evan's breath caught. She wasn't human, she was an alien. One of the local species called the Thalrians. They were known for avoiding humans and living deep inside the colony cities. What was she doing here? Trapped and alone, she looked up at him, trembling. "Please, help me," she whispered again, her voice breaking. He hesitated. His mind screamed at him to leave. This could be a trick. Many gangs on this planet use traps like this to catch travelers. But her voice sounded so real, so desperate, that his heart wouldn't let him walk away. He dropped his bag and pulled out a length of cable from his toolkit, tying it tightly around an old pipe nearby. "Hold on," he said firmly. "I'm going to get you out." He threw the cable down, but the girl didn't move. Her hands were shaking too much. She looked exhausted, maybe injured. The smell from below was awful. Damp, rotten water mixed with blood and oil. Evan sighed. He knew what he had to do. He gripped the cable and started lowering himself down. The walls were slippery and water dripped from above. His boot splashed into the shallow water at the bottom. The girl flinched at the sound. "It's okay," he said gently. "I'm not going to hurt you." Up close, she looked even worse, thin, weak, and cold. Her wrists had deep bruises like she had been tied or chained before. Her breathing was slow and uneven. He reached out carefully. "Can you stand?" She shook her head weakly, tears mixing with the dirt on her cheeks. "They threw me here. They said I should die in the dark." Evan's jaw tightened, anger burned inside him. Whoever had done this had left her to suffer like an animal. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She shivered but didn't resist. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "You're safe now," as he prepared to lift her. A sudden sound echoed above, heavy footsteps on metal. Someone was out there watching. The light from his flashlight flickered again, and a voice drifted down the well, low and mocking. "Well, well, looks like the human found our little secret." Evan froze. Tightening his grip on the girl, shadows moved above the well's edge. He could see faint red lights, the glow of alien rifles. The girl whimpered softly. They came back. He looked up, realizing he was trapped below with no way to fight or run. His only thought was to protect her. "Whatever it cost, stay behind me," he whispered, picking up a broken metal rod from the water. Above, the thugs laughed. "Say goodbye." "Human!" one of them shouted. The next moment, a blaster shot fired, and the light inside the well exploded into chaos. Evan shielded the girl with his body as darkness swallowed them again. Export message as PDF. The human who descended. The air inside the well was thick with smoke and dust. Evan's ears rang from the sound of the blaster. He blinked rapidly, trying to see through the haze. The small alien girl clung to his arm, trembling, her faint silver eyes wide with fear. He could hear footsteps above, the thugs laughing cruelly. Evan took a deep breath and whispered. "Stay quiet." His mind raced. He had no weapons, no backup. Only his stubborn will to survive. He looked around and noticed something strange. Part of the wall behind the girl looked loose. The bricks there seemed older, weaker, maybe hiding something. He pressed his hand against it, and a small section of the wall cracked open, revealing a narrow tunnel. It was dark and smelled of rusted metal. But it was a way out. He turned to the girl. "We're not dying down here. Come on." She looked at him, her lips trembling. Why are you helping me?" He managed a small grin. "Because you asked for help." The next blaster shot hit the edge of the well. Sending dust raining down, Evan didn't wait. He grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her through the small tunnel opening. It was tight and narrow, forcing them to crawl through the mud. The girl winced in pain every time she moved, her body too weak to keep up. "Just a little more," Evan whispered, his voice calm even as fear pressed hard against his chest. Behind them, the voices grew louder. "They're in the tunnel. Seal it!" Evan cursed under his breath and kept crawling faster. The tunnel opened into a small maintenance shaft, pipes running along the walls. He could smell oil and fuel. It must lead toward the old refinery near the scrapyard. He helped the girl stand and guided her through the dimly lit corridor. "What's your name?" he asked softly, trying to keep her awake. "Lyra," she whispered. "My name is Lyra." "All right." "Lyra, stay close to me," he said, giving her a reassuring nod. She stumbled a few times, her legs weak. Evan caught her every time. Her skin felt cold, and her pulse was faint. He wanted to ask who those men were and why they had done this, but he could see the pain in her eyes. It wasn't the time. After several minutes, they reached a small metal grate. Evan kicked it open and climbed out first. Pulling Lyra up after him, they were behind the refinery now. Hidden between two giant fuel tanks, the night was still dark, and the air smelled of oil and smoke. Lyra leaned against a wall, breathing heavily. "They'll find us," she said, fear trembling in her voice. "Not tonight," Evan replied, pulling a dirty cloth from his pocket and wiping the mud off her face. Her silver eyes looked up at him, confused, almost scared to believe he cared. Suddenly, the sound of engines roared in the distance, hover bikes, bright red lights cutting through the darkness. Evan's heart sank. "They're tracking us," he muttered. He looked around quickly and spotted a broken service cart nearby. He helped Lyra climb inside and covered her with spare tarps and metal scraps. He pushed the cart slowly through the dark alleys of the refinery. Trying to stay quiet, the hover bikes zipped past overhead, their searchlights sweeping across the ground. One beam of light brushed across the edge of the cart. Evan froze, holding his breath. The light paused for a second, then moved on. When the sound of engines faded, he exhaled in relief. He turned to Lyra. "You still with me?" She nodded weakly. "You should have left me there," she whispered. "They won't stop until I'm dead." Evan shook his head. "Too bad for them, I don't leave people behind." For the first time, a small smile touched her lips, fragile and uncertain but real. They finally reached Evan's small workshop on the edge of the colony, a place filled with broken machines and half-repaired engines. He locked the door and helped Lyra onto a cot. She shivered, her hands clutching the blanket tightly. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, lightning flashing through the dirty windows. Evan looked out into the storm and whispered to himself, "Whoever did this to you, they'll come back." He turned to her, determination hard in his eyes, but this time, "They'll have to go through me first, export message as PDF." The escape through shadows. The storm raged across the colony that night, rain falling hard against the metal roofs. Evan stood near the small window of his workshop, watching the lightning flash in the distance. His hands were covered in grease and blood. His arm still burned from the blaster wound he got earlier. But he didn't care. The girl he rescued, Lyra, was sleeping on his old cot, wrapped in a blanket, her breathing finally steady. He glanced at her again, wondering what kind of life she had before ending up in that filthy well. She looked too young, too fragile to have gone through so much pain. Her blue skin had bruises and her wrists still showed the marks of metal restraints. Evan clenched his fists, anger burning in his chest. Whoever did this wasn't just cruel, they were monsters. A loud knock echoed against the metal door, sharp and heavy. Evan froze. He reached for his wrench, the only weapon he had. Another knock came, followed by a muffled voice. "Open up, mechanic, colony patrol!" Evan frowned. That didn't sound right. He hadn't called anyone. And the colony patrol didn't work this late. He turned off the workshop lights and whispered to Lyra, "Stay down. Don't make a sound." The door shook violently as someone kicked it from outside. Lyra's eyes snapped open, filled with terror. Evan grabbed a pipe and motioned for her to hide under the workbench. She crawled quietly as the door burst open. 3 aliens stepped inside, tall and armed. their eyes glowing faint red. These weren't patrols, they were bounty hunters. The leader smirked when he saw Evan. "Where is she, human?" "The one you pulled from the well." Evan said nothing. Gripping the pipe tighter, the man chuckled. "Don't play dumb. She's worth more credits than your entire workshop." Before he could finish his sentence, Evan swung the pipe, hitting him square in the chest. The hunter stumbled back with a snarl. The others raised their blasters. But Evan had already pulled a lever on the wall. Sparks exploded as the lights went out. Plunging the workshop into darkness, "Find them," one of the hunters shouted. Evan grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the back exit. Lightning flashed outside, showing their shadows moving between broken machines. Blaster shots sizzled past them, burning holes into the walls. Evan pushed open a hidden trapdoor beneath an old engine table. "Go," he whispered. Lyra hesitated for a second. "You'll get killed." He gave her a quick grin. "Not tonight." She climbed down, and Evan followed, closing the hatch behind them. The tunnel below led to an old sewer system that hadn't been used in years. The air was damp, and the sound of dripping water echoed all around. They ran through the narrow passage, Lyra holding onto his arm for balance. After several minutes, they reached a rusty ladder that led up to a small maintenance hatch. Evan pushed it open carefully and peeked outside. They were in the lower alleys of the colony, dark streets filled with flickering neon lights and empty stalls. They climbed out and hid behind a row of crates. Lyra's breathing was heavy. They won't stop," she whispered. "They're hunters from the syndicate. I was supposed to die in that well." Evan turned to her, his face tense. "Why you? What do they want from you?" She hesitated, her voice breaking. "I saw something they wanted to keep secret. They're selling humans, your kind, as slaves to the outer colonies." Evan's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's impossible. Humans aren't allowed to be traded here." Lyra shook her head, tears in her eyes. "It's true. I tried to stop them, I told my leaders, but they silenced me. Then they threw me away." Evan's anger flared. His people had been through enough. He looked at her with fierce determination. "Then we expose them." "Whatever it takes." Lyra looked at him in shock. "You'd risk your life for that?" He nodded slowly. "You risked yours trying to save others. I can't just walk away." Before she could respond, a faint red light glowed at the end of the alley. A hovering drone scanning the area. Evan quickly pulled Lyra into the shadows, holding his breath as it passed by. When the drone disappeared into the stormy night, Evan whispered, "We can't stay here. I know a place outside the colony. We'll figure out what to do next." Lyra nodded weakly, her eyes filled with trust as they slipped through the rain and neon lights. Their shadows vanished into the dark, a human and an alien girl, running together through a world that wanted them both dead. Export messages, PDF, the humans stand. The night was long and restless. The storm had passed, but the colony street still glistened with rain and oil. Evan and Lyra had made it to the outskirts, hiding inside an abandoned storage hangar. The place smelled of rust and machine grease, broken engines lying everywhere like forgotten bones. Evan sat beside an old generator, wrapping a bandage around his wounded arm. Lyra watched silently, her silver eyes full of guilt. "You should have left me," she whispered softly. "They're after me, not you." Evan looked up at her, his expression calm but firm. "I already told you, Lyra." "I don't leave people behind." She lowered her head, her hands trembling. "They'll kill you, Evan. They don't stop until the job is done." He smiled faintly. "Then they'll have to work hard for it." Outside, thunder rumbled again, not from the sky but from engines. Dozens of hoverbikes roared in the distance. Lights moving closer. Evan stood quickly, his instincts sharpening. The syndicate had found them. He turned to Lyra. "We can't run anymore." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Evan walked over to a pile of old tools and began assembling traps. "We fight," he said simply. "This hangar was a repair site once. It's full of old tech. We can use it." Lyra hesitated, her heart pounding. "You're just one man, Evan. You can't face them all." He picked up a fuel canister and grinned. "I've faced worse, trust me." For the next few minutes, the hangar came alive with quiet movement. Evan set up tripwires between the engines, filled pipes with pressurized gas and connected wires to the generator. He worked quickly, focused, every move precise. Lyra helped as best she could, though her body was still weak. When she accidentally dropped a metal rod, The loud clang echoed through the hangar. Evan froze, listening. Voices outside. Getting closer. They're here, he whispered. Get behind that loader, don't come out no matter what happens, Lyra wanted to argue. But one look at his face stopped her. His eyes were calm. Steady. The eyes of someone who had already accepted the risk. She hid behind the loader, clutching a small piece of metal in fear. The first syndicate soldiers kicked open the door, red light from their helmets glowing in the dark. Spread out, find them, one shouted. Evan crouched behind a pile of machinery, his hand hovering over a switch. When the first soldier stepped onto a wire, Evan flipped the switch. A loud hiss filled the air. Then a fiery explosion erupted across the floor. The soldiers screamed as flames spread, lighting up the hangar like a furnace. More of them rushed in, firing blindly. Blaster bolts tore through metal. Evan ducked and rolled behind a toolbox. Throwing a wrench that hit a fuel drum, the spark ignited it instantly, sending another burst of fire across the room. Through the chaos, Lyra peeked out, her eyes wide with fear and awe. She saw Evan fighting, dodging, striking, defending, not like a soldier but like a man who refused to surrender. One of the syndicate enforcers, larger than the rest, kicked aside the burning wreckage and aimed his blaster at Evan. End of the line, human, he growled. Evan glanced at the loose wire dangling beside him. He smiled. You're right, he said calmly. It's time to end it. He yanked the wire free, sending a surge of electricity across the wet floor. The enforcer screamed as the current hit him, his armor sparking violently before he fell still. Silence followed. Only the crackle of flames and the hum of dying engines. Evan stood there breathing hard, his face smeared with smoke. Lyra ran to him. You're hurt, she cried, seeing blood on his side. He winced but smiled. Nothing new, he said, wiping his face. But before they could rest, a faint beep echoed from the enforcer's belt, a tracking signal. Evan's smile faded. They know where we are now, he said quietly. We have to move. Fast, he helped Lyra climb onto an old hoverbike, the engine sputtering to life after years of silence. The hangar behind them burned brightly against the night sky. As they rode into the darkness, Lyra looked back, her voice trembling. Why do you keep risking your life for me, Evan? He tightened his grip on the handlebars and answered softly, because someone has to stand up, even when no one else will. The wind carried his words away as they vanished into the storm. A human and an alien girl, fleeing through fire and fate, united by one choice that neither of them would ever forget. Export message as PDF. The secret she carried, the twin suns rose over the barren wasteland, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Evan guided the hoverbike across the cracked desert floor. Its engine humming low, Lyra sat behind him. Clutching his jacket tightly, her eyes were half closed, exhaustion pulling her into a restless sleep. They had ridden for hours without stopping, only slowing when the machine coughed from the heat. Evan's wounds ached, but he ignored the pain. His focus stayed on the horizon where the remains of an old communication tower stood tall against the dust storm. When they reached it, he killed the engine and helped Lyra down. The tower was ancient, once part of the colony's early signal network. Now it was rusted and silent, surrounded by dry weeds and old bones of machines. Evan pushed the metal door open, and they stepped inside. The air was dry and stale, filled with the smell of rust. He set Lyra on a bench and checked the room for supplies. Finding some old power cells and a cracked water container, he poured her a small drink. Here, it's not much, but it'll help, she nodded weakly, sipping the water. Then her eyes lifted to his, serious and full of something heavy. You deserve the truth, she whispered. You saved me, even when you didn't know what I was. Evan sat across from her. Silent but attentive, he could see the guilt in her eyes. Then tell me, he said, why were they trying to kill you? Lyra hesitated, her fingers tightening around the cup. I was a messenger for the Thalrian Council, she began softly. We monitor trade routes between alien factions and the human colonies. I thought we were helping to keep peace, but I discovered something terrible. Her voice trembled and she looked away. The syndicate was trading human captives, men, women, even children, selling them as slaves to warlords on distant moons. Evan's eyes darkened, his hands curling into fists. That can't be, he said through clenched teeth. Humans here are under colony protection. She shook her head, tears glistening in her silver eyes. It's all fake, Evan. The council knows they let it happen as long as they get their share of the profit. I tried to expose them. I sent messages to every official channel. I begged them to stop. Instead, they silenced me, stripped me of my position, and threw me in that well to die. Evan stared at her. Silent for a long moment, the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. His people were being traded like cattle, and the system built to protect them was part of it. Finally, he stood, his voice low but strong. Then we tell the world, Lyra. We make them see what they're hiding. Lyra's eyes widened in disbelief. You'd help me after hearing that? Even when it could get you killed? Evan gave a faint smile. You didn't stop trying when it put you in that well. I won't stop either. For a moment, the silence between them was deep. Then she nodded slowly, determination flickering behind her tired eyes. They worked together to power the tower. Evan connected the old generator while Lyra recalibrated the ancient transmitter. The machine groaned and sparked as the system came to life. Dust swirled through the air as the old screen flickered green. She began to type. Entering the encrypted code she remembered from her time as a messenger. Once this goes out, she said softly, every colony channel will receive it. They'll know the truth. But before she could press a send, the lights flickered. A deep hum echoed outside. Followed by the sound of engines, Evan rushed to the window and froze. Black hovercraft circled the tower, their syndicate emblems glowing red. They found us, he muttered. Pulling out his wrench again, Lyra's voice shook. We can't let them stop this transmission. Evan nodded firmly. Then we don't. He turned toward the door as it burst open. Syndicate soldiers storming in. Blaster fire filled the air, sparks flying. Lyra hit the final key on the terminal. A soft beep confirming the signal had begun to transmit. Evan shouted, "Get down!" as he swung the wrench at the nearest soldier. Metal clashed with armor and smoke filled the room. The transmission lights blinked steadily through the chaos as the battle raged. Lyra whispered under her breath, "Please, let the truth reach them outside." The transmission tower glowed faintly against the rising sun. A signal pulsed across the sky, carrying the secret she had risked everything to tell. But inside, Evan and Lyra were far from safe. The Syndicate's forces were closing in, and the war had only just begun. Export message as PDF, the storm before dawn. Smoke filled the air inside the communication tower. The metal walls shook from the explosions, and the floor trembled under their boots. Evan dragged Lyra behind a control console as blaster bolts tore through the room. Sparks showered from the ceiling, lighting up their frightened faces. "Stay low," Evan shouted, gripping his wrench like a weapon. His injured arm burned, but he ignored the pain. Across the room, Syndicate soldiers moved in through the broken doorway, their red armor glowing in the dim light. Lyra's hands trembled as she checked the transmitter. The screen flashed with a warning. Signal interrupted. Her heart dropped. "No!" "The transmission isn't finished yet," she cried. Evan peered around the console, counting the soldiers. "Then finish it, I'll hold them off," he said firmly. She looked at him with disbelief. "You'll die." He gave her a half smile. "Not yet." Before she could protest, Evan charged forward, swinging his wrench with all his strength. He hit one soldier's arm, knocking the blaster away. Another soldier lunged at him. But Evan ducked and rammed a steel pipe into the man's chest. The air filled with shouts, gunfire, and the smell of smoke and burning metal. Lyra's fingers flew over the console, rerouting power manually through old circuits. Come on," she whispered desperately. The screen flickered, showing static, then a faint green bar crawling across, 60% transmission complete. A blaster bolt hit the wall beside her, showering her with sparks. She screamed and ducked. Evan turned instantly, rage flashing in his eyes. He threw a metal panel at the soldier, knocking him backward. Then he ran to Lyra, grabbing her by the shoulders. "We have to go now." "The signal isn't done," she argued, her voice shaking. "If I leave now, everything we've done will be lost." Evan hesitated for a second, then took her hand and pressed it to the final switch. "Then finish it, no matter what happens to me." Before she could reply, another explosion rocked the tower. The blast threw them both to the ground. Lyra's head hit the floor, and everything blurred, her vision dimmed. But she could still see Evan standing, blood running down his face, fighting like a man who refused to die. When she opened her eyes again, the room was filled with bright light. The transmitter had overloaded. A pulse of blue energy shot out, throwing every soldier backward. Evan fell too, gasping for air. The sound of the explosion echoed for miles, then faded into silence. Lyra crawled toward the console, her body weak. The screen blinked one last time. Transmission complete. She smiled faintly. Tears mixing with the soot on her cheeks, she turned to Evan, who was lying on the floor, barely conscious. "It's done," she whispered. "They'll know the truth now." He gave a weak laugh. "Told you. Not to give up." But their moment of relief didn't last. Outside, engines roared again. Dark shapes moved through the smoke. The syndicate reinforcements had arrived. Dozens of drones swarmed around the tower, scanning for survivors. Evan forced himself up, his vision spinning. "We have to move," he said hoarsely. He helped Lyra stand, wrapping an arm around her waist. Together they stumbled out through the back door, climbing down the rusted ladder into the desert night. The air outside was cold, the horizon glowing faintly as dawn approached. Their bodies ached, but the signal had gone out. Somewhere, people were waking up to the truth. As they stumbled through the sand, Lyra looked back at the burning tower. "You saved me twice now, Evan," she said softly, her voice weak but warm. He smiled faintly. "You asked for help, remember?" I just answered. For a long time they walked in silence, the wind whispering around them. Ahead the desert stretched endlessly. But for the first time there was light, a faint, golden glow breaking through the horizon behind them. The syndicate's leader watched from a hovering cruiser, his voice cold and full of fury. "Find them," he ordered. "I don't care how far they run. Bring me the human and the girl." Evan and Lyra didn't look back. They kept walking, each step heavy but full of hope. The dawn was coming, and so was the final fight. Export message as PDF. The answer that echoed. The first light of dawn broke over the endless desert. Painting the sky in gold and crimson, Evan and Lyra stood on a rocky ridge, their clothes torn, their bodies bruised, and their spirits tested below them. The old colony city shimmered faintly in the morning haze, smoke rising from its rooftops. The transmission they sent had spread across every network, every citizen, every miner. Every worker had seen the truth. The syndicate's crimes, the human trafficking, the corruption at the top. Evan watched the horizon silently. The wind carried faint echoes, the sound of chaos, alarms, and rebellion. He could see flashes of light in the distance as people began to rise up. His chest swelled with pride, but his heart was heavy. He knew the syndicate would not fall quietly. Lyra stood beside him, her hair whipping in the wind. "They heard us," she whispered softly. "You did it, Evan." He shook his head. "We did it, Lyra. You were the voice. I just helped you be heard." Before they could say more, the rumble of engines echoed behind them. Lyra turned sharply, fear flashing in her silver eyes. A massive black dropship cut through the clouds. Landing in the sand below, the syndicate had come, and this time, they weren't sending scouts, they were sending an army. Evan's jaw tightened. "So it's come to this," he muttered. He turned to Lyra. "Run toward the canyon. There's an old outpost beyond it. You can hide there." She grabbed his arm desperately. "I'm not leaving you again." He smiled sadly. "You won't be. You'll be carrying what we started." Before she could argue, the ship's ramp dropped open. Dozens of armored soldiers poured out, led by the syndicate's leader himself, a tall alien with crimson eyes and a cruel grin. "You've caused us a lot of trouble." "Human," the leader hissed, stepping forward. "But it ends now." Evan stood firm, gripping a metal rod from the ground like a sword. "You should have finished me when you had the chance," he said coldly. The leader laughed. "You can't fight an army." "Maybe not," Evan said, his voice steady. "But I can make sure you never forget who stood against you." The first shots rang out. Evan dove behind a rock, the sand exploding around him. He rolled and threw a fuel canister toward the soldiers. The explosion tore through the air. Scattering the front line, Lyra screamed his name, her voice breaking through the chaos. She raised her hands, energy glowing faintly between her palms. The same strange light she used before began to pulse brighter. Her eyes glowed silver as she shouted, "Enough!" A wave of raw energy burst from her body, spreading across the battlefield. The syndicate soldiers were thrown back, their weapons shorting out. The leader shielded his face, roaring in rage. Evan looked at her in awe. "Lyra!" She trembled, her body weakening from the power. "I can't control it." He ran to her and caught her before she fell. "You did it, it's enough," he whispered. The ground shook as the syndicate ship began to retreat. Damaged and burning, the remaining soldiers ran. Disappearing into the storm of dust that rose from the desert floor, silence returned, broken only by the wind. Evan held Lyra close, her breathing faint. She looked up at him with a tired smile. "You answered, when no one else did," she whispered. Evan smiled, his eyes soft. "Sometimes, one answer can change everything." She reached up weakly and touched his face. "You changed me, and maybe you changed them too." He looked toward the horizon, where the colony city now shone with scattered fires and the distant sound of freedom. "Maybe," he said, "but it's only the beginning." Lyra's eyes closed. Resting her head against his shoulder, the first full rays of sunlight touched them both. Warm and golden, the nightmare had ended. But the world they'd saved was only just awakening. Evan stood holding her in his arms and began walking toward the rising sun. Behind them, the wind carried the echo of her whisper, a quiet promise that humanity's courage and compassion still had the power to reach across worlds. And as the day began anew, the story of the human who answered a whisper in the dark became legend, a tale told across colonies and stars, reminding everyone that even in the coldest corners of the universe, one voice, one act of kindness, and one human heart could change the fate of worlds. "You said,